our roll call here. Tiffany Edwards, Bill Johnson, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
And Mayor Karen Knudsen. We are glad to have them as our guests today. We're going to be taking this to our February board meeting to have their formal appointment to the SPC. So welcome to the team. Thanks for being there.
Thanks.
Continuing with our roll call, Beth Blackwell. And please say here or acknowledge when I started another instruction.
She's resigned from the Springfield City Council.
Claire Syret.
Here.
Tina Grimaldi.
Here.
Rob Zako.
Yeah.
Scooter Milne. Here. Jack Boysen.
Here.
Paul Comery.
Here.
Sarah Mazzy. And Peter Simmons.
Here.
All right. And we have someone here for public comments. We have Joseph Sinowek from A Family for Every Child.
Good morning, everybody. To start off, I want to say thank you for letting me come here. And so I work for a community partner that works with unhoused youth. We try to find them host homes, which are emergency shelters. And I want to start off by defining what a social determinant of health is. It is a condition or conditions where people live, learn, work, play, and age and influence. Oh my gosh. They are conditions where people live, learn, work, play, and age that influence health risks and outcomes. So public transportation is considered a social determinant of health because it shapes daily access to care, jobs, food, and social connection, all of which strongly influence health outcomes and health equity. When transportation is unreliable or absent, people, especially those with low income, disabilities, or marginalized communities, experience more missed care, chronic disease, and economic hardship. So how we're seeing a lack of rural transportation with Veneta and over by the Mackenzie Bridge. When we try to set someone up with a host home, we have to think about transportation if they are under the age of 18 or 16 and can't provide their own transportation. And we are, as a community partner, running into a bit of a wall with the lack of host homes. And we have a lot of rural locations, but we have to think about how that's going to affect the youth on our caseloads when it comes to transportation. If they need to get a job, how are they going to get there if they're still in school? How are they going to get back? The latest line for Veneta to get back, if I'm not mistaken, is 6:08. So if we have a youth that's trying to start working, they're at that working age and they get out of school at 3:30, it's very difficult to find a way back to their host home without a line that goes past 6. It's hard to get a job that'll allow you to work 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. Usually they want at least around 6 hours a day. So I'm really here to just advocate and hope that we can get more lines to these rural locations and work with LTD to reduce the risk that comes with putting someone in a host home. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anyone else for public comment? We're going to go ahead and move into our staff updates, and I do want to acknowledge that we have a very packed agenda today. So I will be keeping us on point and reminding us of how much time we have for each item, and we'll do a time check here for folks to be mindful of that. All right, we're going to start with our ODOT capital investment plan, and welcome, Bill. Actually, I'm going to give it to Dave. Give the baton to Dave. So.
Just really quickly in terms of staff updates, I just want to share 3 things. So this is our first meeting of the new year. The last time we met was in November. And just as a reminder, refresher, one of the topics we covered last time was the service policy update. And I just wanted to let folks know here, we took the feedback from this group. We're in the process of revising the draft policy with our consultant group right now. We do plan on bringing the final service policy back to SBC in March, and then the board does need to move or adopt the service policy, and we'll do that either in March or April is our current plan. So quick update there. The next one is another topic that we covered previously, which is the fare system roadmap. And we talked a little bit about it at our tour today in terms of the validators on the vehicles and sort of like the investments that we're going to be making in the coming months and years for our fare system. We will be bringing that to the board in February to share with them our recommendations for investments. So stay tuned for that. And then finally, just in terms of our larger, longer range planning efforts, speaking to issues like we just heard about during public comment, our long range mobility plan, we are in the final ODOT, who's our funding partners, the TGM program, to kick that project off. So we should be kicking that off within the next month or so. And that'll be a great opportunity to look at the entire system, think about the investments we'll be making over the next 20 years, how we might be able to increase service, both urban and rural areas, what kind of funding and resources are needed to deliver that service. So those are my updates. Thanks.
Any questions for Dave?
Dave, remind us of the consultant for the mobility plan. Or is that public yet?
Yes, it's public. It's Parametric is the consultant, the lead consultant, and then they have two subs. One doing public engagement, and that is Zan and Associates with their Portland office. And then the other sub is called Locus, and they're a big data analytics firm that will help us sort of use new data tools to think about where there is transit demand, where we're not currently serving that demand, and how we can.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, moving into our agenda items, Vidal is going to kick us off, I believe, with our ODOT capital investment plan development, followed by Bill with support from Bill. Go ahead, Vidal. We have about 20 minutes.
20 minutes, right on. Thank you. And to be honest with you, I really wish I could have been there, but obviously I'm not able to. I'm on special assignment, we'll say, working up in the Portland area. So myself and Bill Johnson will go ahead and do this presentation, and hopefully it's beneficial for everyone here. We did start the conversation with our AC, and obviously we're bringing it to this group here so that you could at least be aware of what's happening. The way we're going to actually do this presentation, I think Bill's going to go first to tick off, or at least kick off the first few slides, and then I'm going to take it on from there. So Bill, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Vidal.
Go ahead. And I can't see where you at. I can only see, I don't see the screen that everyone has. If the slides are on the wall there. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. I am Bill Johnson. I'm a transportation planner with ODOT in the Springfield office. I work with Vidal. He asked me to help him out with the presentation today, and I also will be attending these meetings for the next several months while Vidal is on rotation. The capital investment plan. It's a new document for ODOT. We're just in the process of developing it. We have another document some of you have heard us talk about before, the statewide transportation improvement program, STIP. Most local governments, many of your agencies have a capital improvement program of some kind, a 6-year plan. For ODOT, the STIP is a 4-year plan, and we update it every 3 years. It's a little confusing. The first year and the last year of consecutive STIPs overlap. So it's a federal requirement. We program funding for projects into the STIP. It's a 2-step process, similar to the federal governments, similar to your local governments. There's funds are allocated for projects, or appropriated if you're in the federal government, and then there's a formal authorization process. So funds are initially programmed And then when a project is actually authorized to move forward for spending, it's what's called obligated. Next slide, please, Brian. So this new capital investment plan is intended to supplement the STIP. The STIP is not going away, it's required. ODOT is developing this new process to help us program funding more efficiently, more effectively. There have been some problems with the STIP over the years. We program projects in that maybe aren't fully thought through or developed, and we have to cancel some projects or add funding to them. So this is a technique that some other states use to develop projects outside the STIP. It's a supplemental document, and it provides a more strategic look, both in terms of long-term projects and short-term investments, next few years versus 10 years. This document will be updated every year as projects move through the development process. This slide shows how the CIP is being developed. We're already gone through the first phase of the process where the Oregon Transportation Commission has identified high-level policy, investment policies to guide the further development of the plan. And this slide illustrates that. Let me focus on the second column there, the investment ideas down at the bottom, the Area Commission on Transportation. I'm going to focus on that as we move through these slides because that's an important part of the process. ODOT and the OTC are looking for input from the ACTs, Local Area Commissions on Transportation. And there is one here in the Springfield, Lane County area, the Lane Act. Rob Zako is a member. Claire Surratt used to be a member. And they've already provided input on these high-level policy investment priorities. And then the other columns describe how this process will work once the plan is in place. Projects will be reviewed, screened through some criteria, and then the final project list will be developed and eventually programmed into the STIP as I described. Next slide, please. And this talks about how the capital investment plan will be implemented. We've talked about developing projects. These projects are identified through various means. We have plans. ODOT identifies projects through its own assessment of pavement and culvert replacements. We have lots of data that we use to identify maintenance needs. And then there are these higher level projects that are developed through plans. So those projects will be evaluated through the CIP process and then eventually again programmed into the STIP for funding. And then in project delivery, that's the actual process of designing and constructing projects. That happens after projects have been authorized or for funding to move into the design and construction process. Next slide, please. I mentioned that the ACT has already provided some input. All of the ACTs have, and the OTC has discussed this. This slide illustrates some of the different funding categories. We've done this before in developing STIPs in the past. There's always some discussion, including input from the ACTs at the beginning of every STIP process. So this is somewhat similar. There are these high-level goals that you can see identified on the right. Stewardship, that refers to maintenance. Safety, of course, is a big priority. Mobility, accessibility, that includes multimodal access to transit. Sustainability and climate is an important goal for ODOT, and equity. Those are some scenarios that were considered. Next slide, please. And this is the final preferred scenario selected by the OTC. We looked at the input from the preliminary discussions that we looked at the last slide, and this is what they came up with for the highest priorities. Stewardship, again, that's focusing on the maintenance. That is the biggest, well, second biggest category in the dark blue. Biggest priority, properly so, would be safety. And then you can see the breakdown, mobility and accessibility, 15% of the pie, sustainability and climate, 10%, equity, 10%. That is a high-level overview of how the first phase of this plan has progressed. It's not completed yet. Any questions before I hand the rest of the slides off to Vidal? He's going to talk about the ACT involvement in all of this.
And feel free to save if you want questions at the end too. I'm going to try to go through my slides fairly quick so that if there are questions, we can entertain those too. Okay, so, and I can see the presentation great, but I can't see if a hand goes up in the room. So who's ever monitoring the room, just let me know if someone wants to say anything. Like Bill kind of mentioned, this CIP program or CIP plan, I'm sorry, that we're rolling out, really it's an opportunity for our local folks who are here, those at the table here, in particular our ACTs, to kind of weigh in on what are some of the priority investments that are needed in their area. So not just the Lane ACT is doing it, but every ACT statewide, trying to get that regional perspective of what's happening in their local area, seeing to it that the agency can put those as much as possible into our outlook as far as being able to develop projects. The act of the role itself is pretty heavy in terms of the involvement of putting this CIP development out. They will be making recommendations based on prioritization and weighted goals that would be used to help screen some of those investments that they're thinking about. And I think the slide that was just before this one actually kind of showed the priorities, at least the OTC had in mind as far as what's important for them in terms of those projects. You know, safety was one of the highest ones that was on there. And once the ACT make those recommendations, they're going to share those recommendations to the OTC for them to make that final decision. And again, consider the fact that this is something that's happening statewide with every other act. So there is going to be projects in, projects not in. But again, the CIP is a way for us to be able to, from a long-range perspective, look at projects or get projects into development, let's say 10 years out, and start to be able to do some level of development on those projects to be able to get them into our STIP such that they can be on the ground. We're looking at updates like every 3 to 5 years. And then again, we're going to be identifying needs and investment opportunities that are of high interest to the acts themselves. Every act is kind of different as far as what their priorities are. And we're hoping, at least with the Lane Act, that we will be able to narrow down our priorities such that we can put together a package to be able to send, or recommendations, if you will, to be able to send to the OTC. We expect to be doing these updates at least every 2 years with the ACT. In other words, updating our priorities to be submitted into the CIP. Next slide, please. This is a timeline of the process where we are at right now in rolling this CIP process out. If you can see, we're in January right now. On the top bar, or the top line, is the ACT timeline process. In other words, the ACT has a very good role to play in this, and so this is their timeline on trying to accomplish what we need in terms of an ACT to be able to submit our recommendations. And then the blue line on the bottom is the timeline for the OTC, and when they're going to be able to finalize the CIP. And if you look at the top line for January, right now, the situation is such that we're having continued discussions with the ACT needs and investments. If you're able to attend the next ACT meeting, which is in February, we've actually already had the initial conversation with Amanda and her group back in December. And in February, we'll actually start having that more robust discussion on which projects in terms of priorities that we would like to recommend. And then the line on the bottom, you can kind of see the OTC is still kind of, it says ODOT officially starts the CIP process, at least a second round of discussion with the OTC on progress, what we're doing, where the acts are at. But our overall game plan is by the end of April, possibly May, have our recommendations done so that we can get that down to the OTC, and obviously late 2026, the OTC will have all those recommendations statewide to be able to make that final approval to get that CIP, let's just say, loaded with projects. Next slide, please. Identify needs and investments of interest. And this here is part of the documentation that we've provided for our acts, or that we will be providing for our acts. And this is just a snippet of it on what we would like for them to try to accomplish. Our staff, the agency, or let's just say myself and Bill, we're going to be at the next ACT meeting, and we're going to be showing different heat maps. When I say heat maps, these are maps that kind of identify places of safety needs. Maybe there's pavement needs. Maybe there's various types of transportation needs that are needed throughout Lane County, and we'll be focusing just on Lane County, and we'll be sharing those with the ACT, and the goal would be to help the ACT come up with at least 3 to 5 projects, if you will, needs and investments of highest interest to the ACT, considering the reasonability of the project. In other words, the engineering solution is possible and it can be done. Looking at the urgency and how urgent is this particular project is, and then also looking at the regional and statewide benefits or significance that that project may have. And again, we also want to ensure that those projects that are chosen are in alignment with OTC investments and priorities. And again, we do recognize, if we're looking at the third bullet there, we do recognize there may be, or will likely be, other projects of interest that the ACTs may have. So we are actually going to be compiling 2 lists. One would be the top 3 to 5 priorities. The other would be a top 10 of priorities that we also want to submit for recommendation to the OTC. The refined list, and again, some acts are going to be slightly different in terms of the amount of projects, but the list itself is going to be refined down to the top 3 to 5 priorities, and then the top 10. And we're going to be doing this with, obviously, with ODOT support, regions leadership support, after we get the input from the ACT, take what's given to us, refine those down, and make those submissions to the OTC by the end of April, May of 2026. It seems as if it's a pretty tight timeline, but that's the timeline that we're kind of working with. But nevertheless, we should be able to, I'm hoping that we should be able to get it within 2 meetings with our current ACT. Next slide, please.
Vidal, we do have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Vidal. This is Claire. So I'm curious on the criteria or the consideration of reasonableness, how the concept of affordable is being thought of as folks are being asked to create this priority list.
Good question. In some places, there are what's called significant major or mega projects that folks may want to get accomplished. And again, what is the definition of a mega project? I don't have that specific number for you, but I would understand that if the project is like, way too big, or in terms of dollars, to be able to actually get accomplished. Because again, once it goes into the CIP, there's a 10-year outlook that we're looking at to be able to try to get it completed. And if funding can't happen within 10 years to be able to get that completed simply because it's too large of a project, more than likely it would either get bumped out or, let's just say, removed from the CIP, because again, funding is short everywhere. Consequently, it could be a challenge to be able to get enough money to be able to do that project. And then the other aspect of that engineering solution, there are some solutions that are just way too costly to be able to achieve. I do think that, at least looking at Lane County, there are some projects that may have a high dollar value on it, but nevertheless, as a group, if we feel that that is something important in terms of the ACT, that is something that we could put in there, maybe be not part of the top 3 or 5, but maybe part of the top 10 that could be in there, just to say, hey, we are thinking about this project, or we would like this to be able to be accomplished. But the funding aspect of it, if it's way too high, it's going to be a challenge to actually try to get that in the CIP, because we would like stuff that we can implement or can get accomplished. I
Okay,
don't know if that answers all of your questions, but that's the best way I can
Yeah.
frame it.
no, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And, part of the agency, and thanks for going to the next slide there, part of the things that the agency does do is we try not to look in a vacuum in terms of our projects. We actually like to look at data and make decisions based on the data that's presented to us. And so the different funding units that are shown on here, bridge, pavement, signals, culvert, safety, multimodal aspects of whatever is happening out there, we would like to be able to show you some of those data, show you some of that data, and how we see in terms of what could be the importance of, when I say importance, the priority of a certain project over another, just so that when we're looking at projects, we can kind of make that decision on, you know what, there appears to be pavement needs here more significant than this location. Let's put this pavement project as part of our priority, because we do see an issue at this one particular location. And again, this slide here is just to basically try to show everyone we're really wanting to use a data-driven process to be able to make those evaluations, make those decisions, if you will. Next slide, please. This is an example of what a heat map kind of looks like, and just looking at the bottom of the middle of the slide, kind of shows it says heat map, and then it kind of delineates what the different colors mean: critical, high, moderate, minor, minimal. And again, we would like to show some of that type of information to the ACT so they can see it from how we're looking at it. And it may not necessarily say high, critical, or moderate. It may say safety needs here. It may say, something like bridge needs here, et cetera, et cetera. And again, we're hoping to get that. Actually, I did see a couple of those maps roll out, or at least come to me, and I know they're doing some more refinement to them. And we're hoping by these heat maps, we'll be able to see, or at least the ACT will be able to see, where some of those investments are actually needed in those particular areas. And that would be like Junction City. It will narrow it down to like Junction City, Florence, obviously Springfield, Eugene, even Oak Ridge in some regards too, and Creswell, Cottage Grove, those various cities and so forth. Hopefully we'll be able to see all of what it looks like in terms of where the critical or higher needs are in those areas. Next slide, please. And again, this is another reiteration of one of the previous slides, really trying to identify the top 3 to 5 priority investments. And we would love for those to be achievable, in other words, in terms of reasonableness, in terms of urgency, in terms of regional and statewide significance. In other words, there would be clear benefits that's provided if that project is completed. And again, we want those projects to be aligned with OTC investment priorities. And those are some of the slides that Bill kind of mentioned earlier. Actually, his last slide that kind of outlined or showed where the OTC felt some of those priorities were. Next slide, please. I think this is my last slide. If not, anyway. This is an opportunity. Thanks, Bill. This is an opportunity for the ACT to be able to kind of list out what they feel is important to them in terms of what the actual needs are. I do want to say, too, that, and this kind of goes back to what the question earlier, sometimes investments are needed on a corridor scale. And if that needs to be identified as an ACT, I think that they can go ahead and make that identification. For example, Highway 126. Obviously, when I say 126, let's say 126 west, on 126 west. Again, there's high safety needs through that specific corridor as you're heading out towards Florence. And again, if the ACT wants to say, hey, look, this is a corridor that needs that we actually need to touch, and here are some aspects of it that we feel that are important, we can actually go ahead and do that, take it from a corridor perspective and presenting it to the OTC as far as a recommendation is concerned. And again, we're hoping that that stuff could be doable, or when I say doable, it's reasonable. It's it has some level of urgency in it. Again, the cost is not exuberantly high, and again, we don't want the act to specifically look at cost to be the determining factor. Really, the priorities are not directly cost related. They stem around safety, they stem around mobility, they stem around sustainability, equity, and obviously access. And those are the things we really want the Act to kind of look at when they're making those decisions or coming up with those particular priorities. Next slide, please.
And Vidal, we have about 5 more minutes, so just
Thank you. I appreciate the time check.
you.
And this is what an example worksheet would kind of look like. For example, the top 5, we would go ahead and just list those, put a description, kind of rank them in terms of high, medium, low, look at the regional significance, look at OTC priorities, do they kind of align, and then any added other information that we would like to actually annotate for that specific project for further consideration with the OTC. And so that is what Bill and I have for you today. And Bill, thanks for helping me out with this. And again, I'm sorry I'm not there. I really wanted to be there in person, but again, I'm kind of roped away up here, and consequently, I can't be able to make it. But I'm happy to take or entertain any questions that the group at large may have here.
Thank you, Vidal. I know we appreciate you being on presenting to us today. Any questions, or Dave, you want to share?
I have maybe a comment and a question. So I want to thank ODOT for joining us today and presenting on the CIP process. I think it's really helpful for us to understand how projects are programmed and prioritized for funding at the state level. And so this presentation to SBC kind of continues some of the work we've done over the last year and a half in terms of bringing in the City of Eugene's land use staff, transportation staff, City of Springfield, land use transportation. We've brought in the MPO LCOG staff to talk about the regional transportation plan. And so my takeaway for this group, or what I want you to think about, is, transit is sort of interesting. It operates in this ecosystem across multiple jurisdictions, roadway owners, that sort of thing. And so understanding how these processes work, I think, is important for this group. And also to think, be forward thinking. We heard about, Vidal, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not creating a bunch of new projects. You're going to take sort of existing planned projects and slotting them into the CIP. There may be room for a couple new projects, but you're not starting from a blank slate, right?
How do I say yes and no? And that's a very good question. This is the challenge we have. The 2730 STIP is just now rolling out, going out to be approved. And so the current projects that we have right now, yes, we are trying to, or actually we're in the act of rolling those into our CIP to be delivered. So there will be a group of projects kind of already there, ready to go. But at the same time, we don't want to miss the opportunity that we would have for our locals in being able to suggest, recommend a particular project, if that makes sense. But to your point, though, with the data that we would be presenting, clearly there will be some already identified projects that the agency has already seen long range that needs to get done, such that the group here, or let's just say the Act, can kind of weigh in on those. And again, most of the projects that we have right now and that we're working with the Acts already kind of know where they're at and so forth, but we just need to prioritize what those are. I don't know if that answers your specific question there. I want to leave room for, the mayor could show up in the meeting and said, you know what, Vidal, this great project, I know you don't have it. It's not on your list, but guess what? Here it is, okay? And we don't want to negate that, if that makes sense for you. Now, will it be part of the top 3? I'm not sure. Maybe it'd be part of the 10 group, simply because there's no information on it. There's nothing around it. And so from that perspective, if I can answer your question there more completely, I think that's kind of the path right there.
I think that's really helpful. And I'll just end with one thing here. So I mentioned the long range mobility plan. That will be looking at our network and thinking about how our network evolves over time. And if you understand how our network is designed right now, we operate off of a hub and spoke model where most routes are coming and going from downtown Eugene Station. In the future, we may think about alternative scenarios where not all routes maybe come back to Eugene Station. Maybe there's some new routes that connect across the cities, for example. And to enable that, we need to be able to partner with ODOT to deliver some larger capital projects such as bridges or other projects in the future. Not in the immediate term, but we need to start working towards those. So I think understanding how your project prioritization process works is important for us. I mentioned bridges. There's also facilities like Beltline where it intersects with River Road that are interesting for LTD to be thinking about longer term. So I'll leave it at that.
Real quick, as I'm mindful of time, Vidal, Dave was going to end. I'll let you. 90 seconds.
90 seconds. I can say this in 90 seconds. Dave, one thing I will say, LTD has been a great partner to work with, and I believe that every jurisdiction that's out there has a planning, let's just say a long-range planning plan that shows whatever projects that they have or would like to get done or what's not. And they could prioritize those and then use those, if you will. We're talking specifically the projects that are on the state system are the ones that we're more interested on, but they could look at their long range plan, look at what they have going on, and then bring that in the conversation in terms of projects that may be needed. So again, I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Vidal. And you have 190 seconds. Awesome. And we are still making time. So great job, everyone. All right. Again, we had discussion and feedback, but in the spirit of being mindful of every schedule, we are going to move on to the next topic here. Again, thank you very much, ODOT team, and I appreciate Dave having us learn more about the different organizations partnering with LTD. It's very helpful. Next, we're going to have the Americans with Disabilities ADA Act, ADA bus stop assessment, and we have about 20 minutes for this topic. So,
great.
Thank you, Dave and Randy.
I think we have a presentation.
Yeah, do you want me to go ahead and?
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and present on this item, but I do have Randy Staudinger, who's the project manager online, available to answer specific questions as they come up. So we'll be talking about our fixed route bus stop ADA project that's underway now. So just as a reminder, this is the Strategic Planning Committee, which also has responsibilities around accessibility and ADA compliance with the district. So this project is of particular interest, of course. So talk a little bit about the goals and objectives for the project, scope of work, the project schedule, and then we'll leave time for questions and comments. So if you go to the next slide, that'd be great. So within LTD's CIP, we had identified a project need to do an ADA assessment of all of our bus stops across the system. There's over 1,000 of them across the system, so it's not a small task. It's a fairly large and complex project. And this is part of meeting our requirement to provide accessible facilities. This is something that is a requirement of ADA and PROAG requirements so that we actually have an inventory of our facilities, and then we begin chipping away at making those accessible over time. So what you'll see is this project is being worked on right now, and then in future years, we will likely set aside a certain dollar amount each year to deliver a package of these capital improvements down the road. So the project that's happening right now is doing a detailed evaluation of each bus stop in the system. So looking at existing amenities and then the condition assessment at each stop. We'll identify necessary improvements for non-compliant stops that don't meet the current ADA standard. And we'll develop design, construction, cost estimates to bring those non-compliant stops into compliance. And since the list of improvement needs will be larger than the available funding that we have each year, we'll develop a prioritization plan to chip away at those improvements over time. Next slide. So the scope of work consists of 3 tasks. So the first task is the data collection. So we actually have a team out there in the field right now collecting data. I believe they're using a tablet that geolocates each stop and they take photographs and fill out a form basically on each stop. The second task is to develop the assessment and implementation plan, which we just talked about. And then finally, there will be a final plan. So you can see this map. Each dot is representative of a stop. And like I said, there's over 1,000 of them on our system. We'll look at every single one of them. So this is a pretty time-consuming task. We have multiple individuals going out and doing this work right now. We'll finalize inventory and create a data dictionary, basically to make sure that this is some work we've done right now, is to make sure that we've modeled the type of data that we want to collect, and then we can apply that system-wide. Slide. So this is a sample of the assessment summary. So this is basically what is being put together using the tablets out in the field. So there's a bunch of information fields and then photo logs. We also have space for the cost estimates and then a compliance summary. So basically a description of what needs to be done to bring those stops into compliance. Next slide. All right. Task 2 is 4 elements. So an assessment summary, integration of the estimated improvement costs, the prioritization of those improvements. So where do we go first? Do we tackle the most severe out of compliance stops first, or do we go different geographies around Lane County? We'll get there with prioritization methodology. And then we'll develop the implementation schedule. Like I said, this is something that will carry over multiple years. The other thing I should mention too is that by developing this inventory, we will have the ability to better partner with the roadway jurisdictional owners. So as Eugene, Springfield, Lane County, ODOT are doing road projects, resurfacing roads, or doing sidewalk infill projects, those sorts of things, we can just hand over our needs and then have a conversation with them about potentially leveraging their construction mobilization and teams to actually deliver the work. So some good opportunities there for efficiencies. Next slide. So in terms of the prioritization and evaluation criteria, like I said, we can think about the severity of the problem. We can also incorporate a layer of data in terms of requests from riders. So yeah, exactly. When we get complaints or requests, we can build that into the prioritization methodology. And then visual condition assessment, ranking factors. So again, we probably want to go where there's the worst problems and we have high ridership. So that's something we're thinking about is ridership. Surrounding land uses. So are there social services located nearby, or medical facilities, or places where we might have greater ADA accessibility needs? We might want to go there earlier on. Populations within walking distance to the particular stop. Like I said, services, and then finally funding availability. This is a draft basically table of how we might prioritize using those criteria we just spoke about in terms of the accessibility. Next slide. Continuation. So these bullet points are basically talking about the severity of the compliance issue at the particular location. Next slide. We'd like to get your feedback on the prioritization process. So if you have any suggestions in terms of thinking about how we might develop the prioritization list, I just heard Scooter mention the complaints or requests as an important. So what other considerations should be there? Next slide. And then this is an example of what the actual scoring matrix table would look like. So we'll have our consultant team help us build this out. And once we have the criteria set, then to basically score each criteria for each location. So with 1,000 stops, there's going to be a lot of lines of data here. Can you go back? I'm sorry. So we'll work with the consultant to draft the criteria, and we'll bring that back to SPC in March for your review.
Is that from Capital Metro?
Looking at the stops, it might be. Is this Austin, Texas?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it is.
yeah, north of Marsh.
I was like, I recognize it.
Coronado Hills.
So we do have a consultant team, Kimley Horn, right? Randy is doing the project, and they have a ton of experience doing ADA transition plans and this sort of ADA assessment work. They've worked all over the country. Next slide. Implementation plan. I've already mentioned all of these points. Again, implementing this will take time. We'll want to partner with other agencies for efficiencies, and we'll budget for this, and it'll show up in our schedule. Next slide. The final report will contain the methodology used, our findings and recommendations that basically include the implementation plan that we can then pull into our CIP and other plans. All right. Next slide. Project schedule. So we've already kicked off the data collection. You can see it started in December, so that will go through March. We'll come back to SBC at the March meeting and share the draft prioritization methodology. And then the final product by the end of July. So next steps, we'll engage with SBC in March. And then we'll engage with a design team to begin the design work. And then construction efforts follow. So I believe construction could occur as early as next summer. Get this done this summer. 27, I think so. Yeah. So we can start working on this. Next summer, so maybe we were able to by July. Yeah. That's it. Next slide. Yeah. So questions and comments, please. And I do have Randy online. So Randy, if you're listening in, this might be a good time for you to answer specific questions. Thanks.
Claire, then Peter.
Yeah, thank you. This is good that we're doing this. Just some thoughts on the prioritization piece. And you mentioned the contractor working with you all has a lot of experience. I think, we've talked often about how LTD is particularly unique in the challenges of our urban and rural combination of service provision and the tensions around that in terms of resources available and how we prioritize their use. And so thinking about, a maybe less used stop that is woefully in disrepair in terms of ADA accessibility. Folks who might normally want to use that may have just given up because it's not available, right? And so you might not get any complaints because they've been like, well, that's not an option for me any longer. So just wanting to encourage thinking creatively around that particular dynamic.
Yeah, agreed. And one of the tasks that planning does is, looking at our stop locations, looking at rebalancing methods as well. So just because a stop is in a current location right now, it may not mean it's the best location. There might be a better location that would be more attractive for riders, and that would be a better opportunity to make some improvements at.
Yeah, I had a question looking at these prioritization factors. Is this project only looking at like access to the front door of the bus? I'm just thinking about times where you're going out the back door straight into a blackberry bush. It's not very accessible either. Is that being considered in this project?
Well, already.
So yeah, the project's focus is the boarding pad, the ADA accessible boarding pad, which is the front door on our buses. One thing we are doing with any new stops is we are pouring boarding pads at each door. So whether that's a 40-foot bus, we'll pour a couple boarding pads. A 60-foot bus, we'll pour 3 boarding pads. And then our drivers do receive, training in regards to what the physical environment is like when they do pull up, and if they should be opening all the doors or not based on what those conditions are.
Thank you.
All right, we had Scooter and Karen.
For one, going off what was said earlier, when I first moved here, I was in Veneta, and the only stop that I could get my wheelchair to by myself was in a ditch with grass, and there was no shoulder on the road. And I basically moved, so I didn't have to deal with that. And I'm aware of another wheelchair user that was frequently on the same bus from Veneta into town that also basically just up and moved into town because we couldn't deal with it. So yeah, going along with that we knew that there wasn't going to be a solution anytime soon. We couldn't do anything, so we just up and moved. So we don't complain about that stop anymore because we left. So that's definitely something to consider. It does happen. And one thing I was wondering, I'm not sure if it would be under this or not. One of the biggest problems I have boarding the bus, I don't know if this assessment would catch it or not. And it might be just something that just has to be put under accessibility in general. But, and I'll admit I don't know a solution for it either. I see here info about the height of a stop as far as the curb relative to the roadway and the angle of the stop, the slope for it, and that in combination. Sometimes when you combine that with a specific model of bus, it doesn't work. Yesterday, I had to have a stranger push me up the ramp, and I don't even have push handles on my chair because it was so steep. I tried it myself. I can't use my power assist on that because it's not safe. It's too small of a space, and it was too steep. I physically could not do it. I fell, I rolled back, I dropped my phone. And some drivers are willing to help and some aren't, and some can and some can't. And sometimes it just depends on whether the bus can kneel or not. So, but that's one of the biggest problems I encounter like almost daily. I don't know if that would catch it. I don't know the solution, but this is a really good list, but there's stuff that's not on it. Because it's just a weird stop or something. So I don't know. Just bringing it up for the public comment.
A lot of those issues do exist like too out in the rural lines where there is no sidewalk, there is no infrastructure there for pedestrian movement. That is a concern that we share and that we're going to be working to try and address. I don't know the solution right now. That it's going to be a partnership opportunity like as some of these corridors get further developed. But yeah, when there's not a sidewalk, there's not that elevated surface already, it is a tough situation to deal with. We've seen some other cities address these in interesting ways. Well, they'll actually pour like a 20-foot long sidewalk that, ramps up to the boarding pad and then ramps down just to help develop a little gap for people getting on and off the bus. But I don't know what our solution is going to be yet because it exists in a lot of places.
Yeah, even at the VRC station. A lot of time I've had to wait for a different model bus to come so I can actually get on it.
You're saying this happens daily to you?
Depending on how busy I am in town, it's pretty frequent.
And that's on, with sidewalks and paved, not
Yeah.
at rural stops. Just for Randy's clarification.
Like the mall, basically.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scooter. Karen?
I had two probably relatively quick questions that connect the scope of work slide where you discussed how input was going to be gathered and then to the implementation plan at the end. And the first question is, with populations within walking distance being part of the focus of input, I'm guessing that you mean within a half mile of these stop locations, or is it larger?
Bus stops, we usually do quarter mile, MX would be like half mile.
Okay. And so when will that outreach process be happening relative to input and the priorities?
I want to confirm with Randy, but I believe what that's talking about is actually looking at the demographic profile of the populations around those stops. So if there's socio-demographic factors that we should be, based on census data, that we should be thinking about. So low or no car households, income factors, those sorts of factors. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Is that
Yeah, no, you got it.
So more demographic analysis, not
Yeah.
outreach as far as that piece goes. So the other part then has to do with something we were talking about earlier in the COCA process. With these improvements being rolling over years through the CIP and implemented over time, how will the outreach to the community happen so that when improvements occur and someone who's given up on a stop because it's not accessible, how will that piece of the communications and outreach happen so that the public can hear about this progress and the expanded access?
Yeah, I think we do have, some of the team is doing some of this engagement for us. I believe we have maybe some survey work planned as part of the prioritization methodology development. So there's developing the prioritization methodology, and then that gets applied to all 1,000 stops. And then the next phase, probably on an annual basis, I can imagine, but we don't know for sure until we kind of get more into this project. When we're assembling a package of actual capital improvement projects, I think that's at the point where we would be doing engagement with the communities that are surrounding stop locations. So some engagement now to help us with the prioritization methodology, and then actually we get down to the point of actually building something, then we would do additional engagement with those populations. But Randy, feel free to chime in. Project manager.
Yeah. Also, Carrie is on the coordinated transit plan. They're doing a public survey that I believe is open right now for a bit longer, where they're asking folks with mobility challenges and other populations what their experiences are with service gaps. And so I think that'll be closing here later this winter. So we'll be able to use some of that data as well to look at higher priority stops.
Thank you, folks. I want to be really mindful of time. I know we're going to be bringing this back to our next, the March conversation. And I'm assuming between now and then, is there feedback or anything, or things you all think of, you can direct those to Dave, and Dave will get them to Randy, who appreciate you joining us today, Randy, on this. This is a very robust conversation, and really also speaks to the importance and the value of having diverse voices at this table, because we can look at things from different angles. And I just really appreciate the lens that everyone's bringing to the space. So thank y'all.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
just
we're
want to highlight something Dave said real quick is we will be back in March and we'll have a draft prioritization methodology put together, something for this group to look at, respond to, give suggestions, help us make changes. So between now and then, feel free to think about, what you guys think, aside from just the level of the ADA deficiency that exists, what those other important characteristics are that we need to include.
Thank you, Randy. Really appreciate it. All right, we're going to move on to Dave again with a report prepared by Brett, our Transportation Network Company Program Pilot, TNC.
Right, thanks. So wanted to share some information about a pilot project that we're developing right now. And sort of give you some background about what led us to this proposal and concept. So back in late 2023 through 2024, we worked on our system review plan, which went to the LTD board with a set of recommendations. Don't get too distracted by this, my Venn diagram here. Yeah. I'll tell you what this means in a moment. But the system review made a whole bunch of recommendations in terms of increasing service or span across the network, making a few route changes, and we've been implementing those changes each bid cycle since that plan was approved by the board. One of the things that plan did was it also officially eliminated 3 of our historically low ridership routes. Those routes were the 27, the 73, and the 78. And the plan discusses introducing alternative mobility solutions for the geographic areas that were previously served by those routes. So for a number of reasons, we're probably not bringing a fixed route bus back to those geographic locations that were served previously. So we're starting to think about what alternative mobility solutions could occur there. There's probably a spectrum of things that we could do. On the more expensive and intensive end of things would be something like a micro transit or an on-demand transit type service. Something similar to what we have operating in Cottage Grove, but that is very expensive, and it takes quite a bit of work to get that up and running. We don't currently have funding identified for something of that scale, but it is something that we'll be talking about in the long-range mobility plan. So we're trying to come up with a solution and maybe try something new that we haven't tried before that could help meet mobility needs of these geographic areas in the interim. So what we've got today is a pilot to partner with TNCs or transportation network companies, AKA Uber and Lyft, Uber or Lyft, to provide some sort of subsidized trips within certain geographic areas that were previously served by fixed route. This is something that's being done elsewhere. Chariots in Salem is in the process of studying this right now. They're looking at implementing something in partnership with Lyft. Locally, the University of Oregon partners with Uber and does this type of program for University of Oregon students. They have a couple different program variants. One is for late at night and very early morning trips, and another one is more medical focused for University of Oregon students. So the way that this type of program works is essentially you work with the TNC company or multiple TNC companies. You develop a geographic area, geofenced area, where trips or trips that originate or end in that area are eligible for some sort of discounted ride, is effectively what it is. And so we're starting to explore this, and just to give you a visual of how we would determine the geographic areas eligible for this service, it's a little bit like what you see in front of me here. So I talked about the 2024 system review service reduction. So that's the elimination of 27, 73, 78. We have our current service, and we're thinking about our current service in terms of a 1/4 mile buffer around the current routes. And then we'd like to bring in some sort of an equity factor to this analysis to make sure we're hitting populations that actually really need this type of subsidy or discounted rate. So this is what we're working with right now. And effectively, what you might end up with is an eligible geography that looks like that little purple slice right here. So this is pretty high level right now.
Pretty abstract.
It's pretty abstract, and at a future meeting, I do have Brandon Melton here, who's been digging into the details of actually taking this diagram and making it into something that's real using our routes and census demographics. So I've seen some of the early maps that he's been working on, and we're sort of in the process of fine tuning this. I'll just say that applying this literally to our service area, this is pretty restrictive. This doesn't create a lot of eligibility for the use of the program. So we started there, and now we're kind of moving out to try to make it a more viable type of program. So I'll stop there, and I will just, actually just one more point, and then I'll take some questions. We do have a project in our statewide transportation improvement fund plan that can help fund this program. There's some challenges in terms of we really don't know how the uptake and use of something like this would be until we actually try it. So we need to think through how much budget we would want to allocate towards this. Is it, $10,000? Is it $50,000? What is the right budget amount to put towards a project like this or a pilot project? So I'll stop there.
Claire, Kelly, then Rob.
Yeah, so thank you. So it was one of those routes in the Laurel Hill neighborhood. Yeah, so I have a friend who moved there just right when you cut that service off. And he's a person with a disability, takes public transit. So then now he walks a good 1.5 miles to the bus stop. He's gotten some services through, Lane County Disability that's helped with his transportation, but he is in there's lots of multi-family homes in that along the street he lives on. It's Augusta. And they were very disappointed when that service got eliminated, right? So I think I'm pleased to hear that you're exploring this option. Certainly, he and other members of his household would benefit from this kind of access, and so just want to encourage thinking about there's economic disadvantage, there's disability disadvantage, and so I think it's I'm encouraged to hear that there might be a potential for some funding for it.
Yeah, and the transportation disadvantaged population's definition is still a bit of a work in progress. There's a number of different sources. ODOT has a really good GIS map that sort of has done some work in this area. So we've thought about using that. Then we also use a tool called Remix as our transit planning tool, and they've compiled a number of different sources from the federal government that thinks about these factors, and they do include people with disabilities and other support factors. I will say though, great feedback. I need to be upfront though, with TNCs in this region, there is no guarantee that a TNC will be accessible. So his disability is not physical. I mean, some of it's physical in terms of asthma, and when it's super hot, he cannot walk that mile. But he's bipedal and all that. So I just want to make sure that
Lyft
people
works for him.
understand. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Kelly, Rob, and then Peter.
My question is, did I understand correctly that the TNC program pilot that you're pursuing is only in areas where stops have been removed?
Where routes
have been removed? So it's not looking at any other areas where any
Not at this time. I think in terms of piloting this, I think we need to keep it at a manageable scale before we roll it out on a larger scale. So we've never tested this before. We don't know how many people use it, if it's an effective service or not. So testing it at a smaller scale and addressing these immediate
needs that we're hearing a lot about.
I only raise that only because there could be other criteria that you could use to develop locations for the pilot and not just necessarily use areas where routes have been terminated. Some could include proximity to a station. So groups of people could be shuttled to a station to then take a bus, or other areas where you've heard or LTD has heard from the community that they would like to have a stop there and there isn't one. Not that one had been removed. I just would maybe consider that you might be able to be more successful with the program if you spent a little bit more time trying to reach other areas and not just areas you've already been serving and then stopped, that kind of thing. So, and then I do appreciate Claire's remark about the definition of the transportation disadvantage, just that's got to be a more comprehensive.
We have about 4.5 minutes. I have Rob and then Peter.
Try to be quick. I want to see if I understand the business case for this. So with fixed route service, the more riders you have, the less it costs per rider per trip. I mean, you've got a fixed cost. We've got 100 people on MX bus. It's a lot cheaper to move people than if you've got 3, whatever. So you eliminate a low route because it's not cost effective to provide that service. Let's say hypothetically, the number 27 is costing $50 per trip per rider. And so we're considering here taking a fraction of that, maybe $10, and giving to somebody, or giving to Uber $5. I don't know, whatever it is. It's a fraction of that. And we can't afford the $50 per trip. We don't have the resources to do that. But this is an alternative where, there's a different way of providing that service that we do have the funding. We're exploring that as a pilot. That's basically what we're talking about here.
You've got it, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to be mindful of the optics of a lot of these routes are in the wealthier neighborhoods. And so the idea of subsidizing rides in those neighborhoods might be a difficult sell for a lot of the population. But to look again at the Laurel Hill Valley specifically, if the goal here is to provide mobility to places that don't have fixed route, have you considered also subsidizing Cascadia Mobility and providing bike share in these areas and subsidizing bike share use to people who are in these areas that used to have fixed route transit?
Yes. Let me just start with addressing the census. It's hard to say that these are just wealthy areas.
Yeah.
Actually we've spent some time looking at the census data, and it's not so cut and dry.
Okay.
So there are
U.S. students live there.
Yeah, there's a lot of students, especially in the Laurel Hill Valley, high student population, and so there are mixed incomes in those areas. So stick with the data to help inform our decision making there. And then yes, absolutely, we actually this was the backup plan to a bike share. So we were trying to work with Cascadia Mobility to get a bike share pilot going in these geographic areas, particularly around the Laurel Hill Valley. We were unable to do that for a number of reasons. One is there's not enough bikes in the system. And the investment required to get bikes far exceeded that, plus the increased operational cost. It was far more than we have budgeted for right now. So it is something we thought about. We did have a lot of conversations with Cascadia, but we were unable to come up with a solution that was viable.
Last question, Claire.
Yeah, just real quick. Yeah, so Laurel Hill, yes, it does have a wealthy census tract, but the street my friend lives on, I mean, like I said, multiple apartment complexes. There are students, but also just working class folks, right? I mean, that's who's living in this apartment complex that I see. And then the other piece I meant to say before was, these folks would be happy just to get a lift to the MX, right? Because then once they get there, then they really are being served by the full system. So at least on that particular route.
Can I just make one quick comment? So the routes were stopped for financial reasons. Is that correct?
Because there were historically low ridership routes, so they were just not productive routes. And there was also some roadway condition issues, particularly in Laurel Hill Valley. It's really difficult to run a full-size bus through there.
So I was just building on Rob's point, which is it shouldn't just be cost conscious, but accessibility to be part of the equation in terms of that.
Now, one more question. Like,
My
it's your first
tiny-
meeting, you get one more year to.
My small comment will build on what Kelly just said, and that I, with this as a strategy to expand the feasibility of coverage, I do think it is important to have our eyes on which parts of our community are seeing the departure of bus service and the departure of transportation options that they might understand to be part of the backbone of a system and a multimodal system. And that if this, just want to give you some feedback that would say, please look at other places where we've seen services depart since essentially the pandemic, where there may be latent ridership that could also be a part of proofing a pilot and who is really interested in using this type of a service and where the need really is. So I'd be curious to see that.
Great conversation, folks. Thank you. All right, we're going to move into our final agenda item. It's the audible announcements pilot. So Dave, you are.
And I'm going to call on our senior service planner, Brett Smith, to help me with this. He's been in the details, working on getting this going. So I think I did mention this at our last meeting that we were going to bring this back to the group. This is what we're calling our audible announcements pilot. I don't have a presentation for you. And we're here to talk about this pilot and what's involved here. So the objectives of the pilot include improving accessibility for riders with visual impairments, supporting riders using mobility devices, especially those secured in rear-facing orientations who can't see the reader sign inside the bus, enhancing general rider awareness of upcoming stops, and then collecting feedback from operators and riders to inform what it might look like to implement this system-wide. So audible announcements. So if you were riding today, if you're paying close attention, you might have heard at some key locations. Well, on MX, we announce all of the MX stations, but when we were riding back in, you might have heard that we announce some stops, but not all stops. And in terms of an audible announcement, there is an ADA requirement here that transit agencies make audible announcements at major stops and time points. It's the minimum requirement, and that's effectively what we're doing at LTD today. Is we're meeting the minimum ADA requirement by announcing major stops and time points. What we would like to do here is to figure out how we can announce all stops, and that just improves accessibility for everybody. It's easier just for your average rider, so they're not having to look at the sign. They can just hear when stops are announced, and they'll know when they need to hop off the bus. So the timeline for this is we've been working internally to work with our operators so that they sort of understand what we're attempting to do here, get feedback from them. We're presenting information to SBC here, and we'll share information forward as well. We're going to roll this out first on Route 1. Is that still correct, Brett? Which is the new downtown loop. And then shortly thereafter, later this winter, we'll start limiting or rolling this out to just a few more routes to test it out. Following that, we'll do surveys, listening sessions with our operators, gathering rider feedback. We'll do a review of how things are going midway through, and then do a final evaluation. And then really we need to determine how we roll this out system-wide if it does show to be popular and successful. There's a lot of details with this that I'm learning along the way. I thought this was going to be really easy. I thought we could just flip a switch and just turn these things on. No, it doesn't work like that. And Brett, I don't know if you want to sort of speak through sort of at a high level. What are the mechanics behind audible announcements on our buses?
Yeah. Oh, you want me to step there? Okay. So yeah, audible announcements, it sounds really cool. I mean, if you rode the bus like we did today, just all of a sudden they play, and they tell you where you're at and you're like, oh, cool, my station, I pull the plug and you go. And that's all great, but there's a lot more to it than just that. Stops are GPS, as you well know, and they also have announcement zones. So as a bus enters that zone, it plays and exits. So you have to get those right. That's just that's the easy part, quite honestly. The hard part is the voice on the bus itself, right? So we have mostly just what are called wave files. Somebody actually recorded those physically. We used to pay somebody to record these and put them in. And that's kind of an old school way of doing it now. Nowadays, you use AI generated voices and or text to speech, as they call it. And it's really good. It works really good. Yeah, the problem is our text to speech versus our old wave files have volume levels that aren't the same. And while the technology is really good, it's not that simple to bring those to the same level. So, and buses can only be turned up volume-wise on a bus by series of bus. So you're starting to see all the problems all of a sudden that I'm having with this project of trying to figure out how do we do this in a way that makes it work and sounds good and puts out a quality product that LTD is known for. So we don't want to put something out there that doesn't work. So Route 1 is our great opportunity to use that route. It's a short route. We can use it as our pilot. And we're going to roll that out on February 1st with our winter service change. And we'll be on that bus a lot. I'm already on that bus a lot, just talking to folks because it is a pilot route as it is. And listening to those announcements, making sure they trigger properly, make sure the sound levels are right. It's going to take a little bit for us to get those to bounce out. Our IT folks, they're working on that right now. It's a big project. It's a much bigger project than it sounds, and as Dave says, to flip a switch. So anyway, so that's the gist.
I'm glad you're thinking about this. I'm reminded of a transit system I rode somewhere. It's probably Washington, D.C. They had an audible system, but it was almost unintelligible. You couldn't make it out. It was almost useless. It was garbled. I don't know if it was background noise, all those considerations you're describing. It's no small consideration.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about ambient noise on a bus yet. So if you've ridden an electric bus, they're really super quiet, right? You ride a full diesel bus, they're much more noisier. Buses that have cushions in them versus buses that don't have cushions in them have different ambient noises. So having to be able to do that whole process of trying to make it sound right all the time on every bus, on every type of bus, with different electronics and different things is going to be a bit of a challenge. So, but we'll get her done. My IT folks, they're confident it can be done, but it will take a little bit of growing pain to get it up and running properly. So.
Thanks, Brad.
Not to add to the list of stuff, but I'm guessing you've probably already encountered this. Text to speech doesn't always know how to say a local name. So are you kind of fudging some of that, or would it be possible to maybe hire somebody local?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Say it.
So I put in Yopoa Terrace the other day, right? That one surely will not come out correctly, right? It did. It came out perfect, actually. So we are actually listening to every single one of them as we do it to make sure that it sounds the way it's supposed to say and phonetically, so we don't have Willamette out there and things like that. You know what I mean? So we will listen to that. We do have some tools that can be able to, you can actually put it in phonetically. And different things too.
So you can budget if you have to.
Yeah, so. Good question.
Actually, I have a question about this. I noticed the app has like the ability will this kind of coordinate with the app? And again, I didn't actually use it because I don't need a device, but it has a tool on there where it can announce the stations as you can connect it. I don't know if that's
separate systems.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just curious because I saw that and I was like, oh, that's great. I don't need that, but
yeah,
possibility.
Yeah, no, totally different system. Okay. So.
Any other questions? Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your time. Thanks, new folks that are joining us today. We will go ahead and, my gosh, we're adjourning at 1:55, is that correct? So thank you, everyone. Thanks, guests. Thanks, everyone, for your time. Thanks, staff. Also, what a wonderful meeting today. Thank you all for being here. This was really rich and great to have a very robust team in your time today. Okay, adjourned.
Thanks very much. It was,
Thank
it
you,
was
Chair.
fun. I know it took a lot to arrange.